Hello everyone, welcome to the Uncertified Pilot. For those who don't know, I'm Tim. I'm a Twitch streamer, educational researcher, and a complete flight simulation addict. So yesterday, the Flight Simulator Weekend Convention was held in the Netherlands, one of the biggest in Europe, and I did a talk there, which was actually quite amazing. Huge audience, huge screen. And I did a talk about what really drives me as the uncertified pilot to pursue my flight simulation practice. It was really a wonderful convention. I also did a video tour around the convention in another video on my channel, so check that one out if you're curious. I also had my very first VR, virtual reality experience in flight sim, which was just so thrilling, mind-blowing. It was really exciting. But after the convention, some of you who were not able to attend the talk were curious whether I would do a translation into English and perhaps post it on YouTube as well and on Twitch, so you can catch up on what my talk was all about. So that's what I'm doing right now. So this is actually kind of like a presentation for those who are curious of what I'm up to. A presentation, the exact same slides, only translated into English, that I gave yesterday at Flight Simulator Weekend 2017. I did that, by the way, with Avanek. I invited him to do a couple of parts of the presentation. We're Flight Simulator buddies, but this time around I'm going to do this presentation on my own as part of my own brand of the Uncertified Pilot. So I also changed the title a little bit. So why flight simulation should be taught in school, which is not really a new, really novel kind of thing to talk about. Even AOPA, one of the International Global Aviation Association or Pilot Association, has already been developing all kinds of curricula or lesson materials for high schools to engage students, high school students in aviation and becoming a pilot, which is a really good effort. But I think that flight simulation could be a wonderful vehicle, almost a learning environment to really make a difference in terms of how we can engage our next generation of talented young people in the world of aviation, because there's so much to do, and I think it's thrilling to pretty much anyone what's going on there. So that's why I changed the title, and it's also really resembles the main core message of what my presentation was all about. Now again, I'm not pretending that I've got all the wisdom in store here and I have a message that I think should convince everyone. This is just my own personal opinion, something I really feel strongly about and that I talked about at Flight Simulator Weekend yesterday, the 4th and 5th of November 2017. So this is just a genuine share, I guess, as part of my channel, and perhaps I will inspire some of you to delve deeper into this topic and perhaps collaborate with me, because this is something that well, really represents or characterizes my channel, my stream, me as a person, as a streamer. So I'm really curious to see and learn what you think about this message. Okay, so I designed this presentation initially for those who are actually quite unfamiliar with flight simming. So people who are new and were visiting the Flight Simulator Weekend Convention. So I know that many of you who are watching my stream are already quite knowledgeable, even more knowledgeable and more experienced than I am as a flight simulator pilot, or sometimes even as a real-world pilot. So again, a lot of stuff in this presentation might be quite familiar to you, but not so much, I guess, for people who are actually not aware of flight simulation and what a thrill and what educational value flight simulation has to, well, to engage yourself, to learn something new, to challenge yourself. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. So this is tailored for those who are new to flight sim, and not only men, but also women, also young and old. So and that was also kind of the challenge of this presentation for me when I was designing the slides and the talk, was to give a talk that would not only target more experienced flight simmers, but also those who are just new to flight simming, and at the same time really make clear this core message that I think that flight simulation is so valuable and so thrilling to pretty much anyone, that it should be taught in school. So I hope I will receive the same kind of positive responses that I got from doing the talk at Flight Simulator Weekend. Let me know, guys, what you think. All right, so why flight simulation should be taught in school. So first off, I'm Tim. I work as an educational designer, a researcher at the University of Twente in the Netherlands. I'm actually a PhD student in my final year. Really passionate about education and how we should actually stimulate our children in school to become much more creative problem solvers, become much more curious. That I will talk about in this presentation as well and relate to flight simulation. Next to my job, I am a really passionate and quite active flight simulation practitioner, as most of you already know. And I live video stream my own flight simulator flights from my computer at home to YouTube and to Twitch to share with everyone, because I think that's really cool to do. It's just fun to share that thrill, and also to meet many more flight simulator friends that are more experienced than me, or real world pilots actually, that help me out to become a better flight simulator pilot as a result. So that's kind of generally what I'm up to. Now, in the next 45 minutes, I'm gonna take you along a journey through the world of flight simulation, through my eyes at least. Especially for those who are new to flight simming, to tickle you perhaps, to spark your interest in flight simulation, and perhaps already show you a few of the building blocks almost of how rich, or how what the potential value might be in terms of entertainment, but also education of flight simulation. So it's a kind of a staggered kind of presentation or approach. So I will begin quite simple and then build my way up until we reach a stage of flight simming practice that, well, kind of resembles the practice that I'm engaged in as a more experienced flight simmer, I guess, and many others of you, I think. So that's kind of like the idea. All right, so first off, the general notion, the core notion of the uncertified pilot, what I really stand for, what I believe in, is that I think that there's a student pilot in every one of us. No matter how old you are, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter. I think that deep within us, we all have an affinity with flying, with learning how to fly, and to be a pilot. And that's also why I just love to talk about aviation and flight simulation in particular, to show you what fun it is to learn how to fly, not just to fly, but to learn how to fly and to challenge yourself. But it's important in this sense, and I guess I'm approaching this in a bit more scientific way. I think it's really important to just stand still for just a few slides with that word pilot and what that might mean, because most people, whether they are aware of it or not, associate pilots quite regularly, often, with those macho guys who bring us from our local airport to our holiday destination airport, right? In the eyes of many people, pilots are chauffeurs, primarily, who transport cargo or passengers, and that's it. Now, to be clear, playing the role of a chauffeur is not really the identity or the drive that attracts me to flight simulation practice or to learning how to fly. This is just a very small particular aspect or role or identity, perhaps even a competency of what it is to be a pilot, right? But you can imagine perhaps that, and this is completely well, not necessarily something that you can do anything about, but if this is the small or narrow perception that you have of what it is to be a pilot, which is actually quite a naive and also therefore quite negative perception of what it means to be a pilot, then it's actually not that surprising that many people do not even consider flight simulation as a hobby or as an interest or something that they can challenge themselves with or get some kind of satisfaction of. And that's just because they hold on to this, well, misconception of what it is to be a pilot. So one of the things that I did in my talk, and what I'm going to do right now, is to shatter that image of just being a chauffeur. Not really shatter it perhaps, I guess. It's more like broadening it, because there's nothing wrong with just being or playing a chauffeur almost as being a pilot or flight simulation pilot. But it's just one tiny aspect. To me, and I think to many other pilots, also real world pilots, the real drive of being a pilot is about being a pioneer. And not just practically, but also intellectually. And that's something that is really core to my channel, to my brand, that's the Uncertified Pilot. Something that I hope to emanate in all my flights is just the joy of pioneering. And this is also a little bit of a fuzzy concept, I guess. But what I mean with this is that to me, flying, the thrill of flying, also the educational value of flying, is to fly to some unfamiliar terrain or scenery or airport that I've never been before, and therefore to study charts, to design a really safe and efficient flight plan, to consider changes in weather, which is also possible in the flight sim. You can actually set up all kinds of real world weather conditions, which is really, really cool. But also to learn how to manage your airplane, how to collaborate with your co-pilot while you are flying, to test new airplanes. There is a huge palette of all kinds of competencies or identities almost that I associate, or anyone I think should associate with what it means, what it feels like to be a pilot, and also a sim pilot, which is not something that you necessarily associate being a pilot with. Usually people just think about just playing a chauffeur, and I think, well, that's something that does not interest me, so flight simulation does also not interest me. Well, what I really tried to do in my talk, and again here as well, is to broaden that perception and to tempt you to consider that being a pilot, playing a pilot in flight sim is a much more rich concept, a much more rich feeling that involves all kinds of, I mean, in a way, being a pilot is a really interdisciplinary kind of practice. It involves all kinds of different competencies, learning about the weather, the physics of your airplane, the psychology of being a pilot, that really interests me, how to get that peak performance going as a pilot. It's such a rich concept. It's amazing. And if you don't know about this, then, well, you might dismiss exploring flight sim for the wrong reasons, or just for one reason, while there actually are many other things that you can do to my screen here just went black, there are many other things in flight sim that could really engage you or could really satisfy you as a practitioner, that goes beyond just playing being a chauffeur. Now, and that pioneering feeling, and this is something that is more typical or more specifically related to the Netherlands, that Flight Simulator Convention was held in the Aviodroom. It was an aviation museum, really nice one. And at this point in this slide, I asked the audience, well, guys, do you recognize these guys? Do you recognize these aviation pioneers? Well, I think I only saw one hand rising with some guy who knew. But these are actually our Dutch aviation heroes. You might recognize perhaps Fokker, for example, Anthony Fokker. This is something that culturally, historically, is something that, at least in the Netherlands, we should be very, very proud of. I mean, very, very few people know in the Netherlands that actually in the 1920s, the Netherlands and the company Fokker was actually leading in the world. It was the most successful airplane building company in the world. It was, well, that really excites me, but it also shows you that, and that was kind of, again, part of the main message here, talking to that Dutch audience, that being a pioneer is in our being. It's rushing through our veins. Being a pioneer, I think, even characterizes us as humans. Pioneering is so natural to us all. Now, what the interesting thing is that when you walk into any particular primary school, elementary school, at least here in the Netherlands, but I would expect the same thing to happen also in other schools abroad, in other countries, in the US or wherever. If you ask children, boys and girls in general, what kind of work is there to be done in the world of aviation, in that industry, and give me a drawing of what kind of work might fit you, fit your talents, fit your interests in that aviation industry. Give me a drawing of that. Well, what kind of drawings would you receive? Well, generally, almost exclusively, at least here in the Netherlands, you will get these kinds of drawings. The girls, they draw being a stewardess, almost exclusively. The boys like to be a fighter pilot and shoot and destroy everything they see. Now, I'm not saying that being a stewardess or a fighter pilot is wrong or something that we that we don't want. No, that's not what I'm saying. These are really very valuable professions. The problem that I have, or the issue that I have, is that if this is the only perception, that boys and girls have of what kind of work that needs to be done in the industry of aviation, then these children might unnecessarily dismiss that industry as something that might be valuable for them and something that they can contribute to as just human beings and making a difference. And that's really a shame. So again, this is about perception, I think, and I think that's really, really important. And that's also why I think many boys and girls might dismiss flight simulation, especially girls, because they think, well, flight simulation, just commanding a airplane, is not meant for girls. So just by definition, I will not consider playing around with flight sim, right? Which is so unnecessary and so not true. So yeah, I think I feel really strongly about that. And just to broaden that concept a little bit more, it's not just only about creating or developing new pilots. The industry of aviation is huge and really rapidly expanding. There are so many scientific and technological developments going on, flying on electrical power, solar power, supersonic flight, glass cockpits. That software needs to be designed by someone, all kinds of new safety. We need so many diverse talents to solve all of the complex also societal problems that are associated, or not problems, but challenges associated with aviation. It's really a really exciting era, a time right now where we need to, again, engage and inspire our youngest to perhaps play a role in making a difference in this industry. So I'm also not only talking about just becoming a pilot, but really becoming a pioneering thinker almost. And that can be applied in the role of being a pilot, but it can also be like being an aviation engineer or, an inventor or anything like that. But it's a really exciting industry that we need to really excite, or we should inspire our next generation of talented boys and girls to make a difference in that industry, I think. Now, and I think that flight simulation, and I'm using X-Plane because I'm an X-Plane user here, can provide a wonderful, hugely potential learning environment that we can use in schools, but also at home, as parents, to our children, to inspire new pioneers, to inspire that pioneering kind of thinking in our children. That goes beyond just playing a chauffeur and getting your airplane from A to B, but it's about problem solving. It's about being an adventurer, dreaming about new things that you can do. And flight simulation is such a rich kind of environment that I think that we should broaden that concept, not just for our own sake, but also to attract many more people to our wonderful hobby, our wonderful practice of flight simulation. And that's also something of a critical note that I placed here also at Flight Simulator Weekend all the way around, all day around, that if you are a newcomer, and I think this also applies to Flight SimCon, by the way, the US version of a Flight Sim convention, which I cannot wait to attend one day, is that when newcomers arrive or browse through these flight simulator exhibitions, they might very, very easily develop the wrong idea of what flight simulation is about. This is just one picture that was taken not the last flight simulator weekend here in the Netherlands, but I think the year before, 2016. Now, if you look at this picture closely, you see pretty much almost completely covered by men, elderly men. No female. I think there's only one female in the right corner there. Also, in Flight Simulator Convention, that's especially true for the one of Flight Simulator Weekend. All the stands most stands exhibit or present really sophisticated flight simulation hardware. So sophisticated that it actually intimidates visitors. Yesterday I was also browsing along all the exhibitions and just asking people that I believe were newcomers, parents with their children, also were attending the museum and then were curious to also take a look at the FS Weekend floor, around that floor, and ask them, what do you think? And they actually feel quite intimidated. It feels almost like, first of all, as a more private LAN party of people just enjoying themselves with flight simming, and they don't really feel that they can access or be part of that flight simulation enthusiasm. They also think that they need a lot of technical knowledge to be able to enjoy flight sim. All kinds of misconceptions that prevent them from considering flight sim, which are so unnecessary. So one of the things that I really like to do also with the Uncertified Pilot is to brand flight simulation also in a more broader sense, in a more better way, so we can attract other newcomers to the hobby, to the practice as well. Because usually Flight Simulator Convention, I think Flight Sim Con as well, is usually tailored, focused, intended for quite experienced flight simmers already, right? It's not really tailored or intended to welcome newcomers necessarily. Obviously there will be newcomers, but I think there's a lot that can be done to interest or to generate more interest in general for people with many different backgrounds, interest to what it means to be a flight simulator pilot and what kind of satisfaction that can bring. So in my presentation, I like to again take you on a journey through the world of flight simulation. So I'm going to talk about what flight simulation is, how it works, how the practice works, so how you can practice flight simulation, at least in my case. But also, while we are on that journey, I'd like to tackle some misconceptions that I think unnecessarily prevent people, newcomers, to consider becoming a sim pilot as well. Again, I cannot leave my scientific thinking out of this story. I need to somehow. This is a really important message to me, and I'd like to be spot on here and quite clear of what I mean. So it's not also the Uncertified Pilot, therefore, is not just about just the mere joy of flying, but there is some kind of a message that I hope that I'm emanating through all of my flights to inspire my viewers that flight simulation is something that might interest pretty much anyone, and I think that's a really important message. So that's why I'm, I guess, taking a lot of time to nail that message or to make it as clear as possible. So first off, for rich and poor. So one of the things that I noticed also with the last Flight Simulator Weekend was that many people think that you need a lot of money to practice flight simulation. Well, that might be funny, and it is obviously true. If you like to go on a really beyond the basics and you like to buy your own cockpit and that kind of stuff, yeah, it is very expensive. But not necessarily. You can also, for free, already start with flight simulation. That's important to know for many, I think. So that's the first one that I'm going to talk about. A second one is that flight simulation is not only intended for nerds, people who already know a lot about aviation, but it's also for laymen, people who are completely unaware of anything in aviation or have no knowledge of what it means to be a pilot or how an airplane works. Never been in an airplane before. And I think that's also an important perception to stimulate, that also if you're totally new to flight simming or to aviation, flight simming can be such a great hobby, such a great practice. And that's actually the biggest chunk of the presentation, I think about 80% or so. I'm going to talk about how you can add software to your baseline kind of flight simming to get more realism and to get, but these are optional add-ons. So if you feel intimidated by all of those add-ons that make your flights much more realistic or complex, like ATC and pilotedge, well, you don't have to. You can just start even with the iPad. So that's something that I'm going to talk about in that stage of the presentation. The next one is flight simulation is not only intended for males. It's also for women. I'm gonna also in that talk refer to Mrs. Uncertified, so my girlfriend, who's also got an interest going in flight simulation. Well, she's been streaming here on the channel as well. I think that's very, very important to emphasize once more, and also here as part of this presentation. And lastly, that flight simulation is not just for play, it's not just for home, but I think it can be such a high potential learning environment, a tool in schools, primary schools, not only in high schools, but also primary schools, to engage children in all kinds of pioneering thinking that is so important and so healthy, and can also lead children to find a place where they can actually further develop their talents and feel that they can self-realize themselves. I think it's a really wonderful industry, and I think that too few children, boys and girls, know about what kind of very interesting and engaging, thrilling challenges are ahead, where we need, well, talented young children to solve those problems in the future and challenges. So I think that's really important. So these are the 4 misconceptions, conceptions that I'm going to talk about through that journey through flight simming. Okay, so here we are in X-plane in a Cessna Skyhawk. First off, and this is for those who are completely new to flight simming, I first like to talk about what kind of flight simulation packages are out there, because there are many different ones. Well, usually the most classic one is Flight Simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator X, the left one there, to the most on the left side. But in the last 5 or 10 years or so, many new different flight simulation software packages were launched. And these are generally the same. There are differences, and if you're a really advanced sim pilot, you might have a preference. In my case, I really like to fly with X-plane 11. I'm going to go into in depth of what the differences are and why I think X-plane to me fits better to me as a sim pilot. This slide is merely about just showing you that there are many different flight simulation. Oh, there goes my screen again. Yeah. Many different flight simulation platforms that you can use depending on what you're looking for. There are also flight simulators specifically for sailplanes. Well, just have a look. There are many videos on YouTube that will tell you those differences, but it's good to know. Now, you can see the prices as well. X-plane and also Prepared are one of the most expensive flight simulator packages out there. But if you own an iPad, you can also start with flight simulation for free on your couch with a cup of coffee. X-plane is also available on mobile, on iPad, and it's actually quite sophisticated. Lots of interaction points, quite a realistic flight model actually, and they're constantly improving on that software. It's really great, just for free. Obviously, the app also offers all kinds of in-app purchases for particular airplanes and airports and that kind of stuff. But if you like and you're completely new to flight simming and you own an iPad, well, check out X-plane for the iPad and have a look. So it's important to know that this is also available for free. You don't have to necessarily spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars just to get yourself in the virtual world of flight simulation per se. Now, but if you are looking and already noticing that you are quite interested in flight simulation, well, you need to hop over or transition to a desktop kind of setup. So let's pretend that this is our cockpit room. First off, you need a gaming computer. And what I mean with a gaming computer, and again, I don't have the time to go in depth here. Again, search on YouTube and on Google on what a good gaming computer might be. But it should be a computer that is powerful enough to generate all the nice and fancy graphics in your flight sim. So it primarily needs to have a good graphics card. The more older flight simulation platforms actually rely quite more extensively on CPU. But that shift is actually going on. So now the graphics card is going to do a lot more of the work, hopefully, also for X-Plane and well, the other flight simulation platforms. So a good graphics card is really, really important. But you need to have a proper gaming computer. Actually, flight simulation is a quite intensive virtual environment. The entire world is generated, is available in flight simming, and the flight model needs to be generated. The weather, light effects. There's really a lot going on. A lot more is going on in flight simulation than just a plain old shooter game. So that's why you need quite a heavy-duty kind of gaming computer. But it shouldn't necessarily be that expensive, but it should have some of the basics that I think, well, define a gaming computer like a good graphics card. Next up, you need a joystick. You can also fly with a mouse or with a keyboard, but I would not recommend anyone to do that. Just buy a plain old joystick, even for just $20 or so. You will have a great joystick. And again, if you are up for more and you have some more money to spend, have a look at a yoke or even other joysticks or accessories that you can buy. This is all up to you, but you need a joystick. If you don't fly with a joystick initially, you might dismiss flight simming because it's a little bit too difficult to fly. Well, obviously it's difficult to fly an airplane using a keyboard and just buttons. Get yourself a joystick, highly recommended. And lastly, nowadays many flight simmers are actually flying online, not just offline with their own AI traffic, but they fly online together on multiplayer, sometimes even with air traffic controllers that I'm going to talk about very, very soon. So I would also recommend, if you're interested, to get yourself a nice headset with a microphone and be connected to the internet, which is actually most of the time a given. But still, these are actually the three main requirements for practicing flight simulation. Now, in my case, this is my cockpit, and again, it's not necessary to create or develop or construct a huge, sophisticated cockpit. Just with a joystick and a computer screen and a good gaming computer, you can already start and go very far into the world of flight simulation. I really like flying a Cessna Skyhawk, and I thought I also like just to build a cockpit. And there are actually flight sim practitioners who are specifically interested in designing cockpits, not just flying, but creating all the buttons and, well, just designing their own cockpits. Which is really, really fun. And it's also something that characterized Flight Simulator Weekend in the Netherlands. There were many cockpit builders. So if you're also interested in that stuff, really consider coming over next year at Flight Simulator Weekend, because there's so much to see and so much to learn. It's really, really fun. So this is my cockpit, and I totally love it. It was totally worth the time, but it's not necessary. It's up to you how you like to begin your flight simulator adventures. So you can start basic, a joystick, a gaming computer, and you are completely set to have a lot of fun. Now that completes the first kind of misconception, at least for the time being, and considering the limits of this presentation. There's a lot more to say here, but hey. Next up, for nerds and laymen. So this is actually the biggest chunk of the presentation. I think it's interesting before we're going to fly, also just to show, especially when you're new to flight simulation, what a flight simulator looks like. It's a game essentially. So let's have just a general look. This is X-Plane. It just has a menu, but also what the setup is of a flight. I mean, for most of us who are already experienced with flying, this is just a no-brainer. But for those who are completely new to flight simming, it's nice to know that you can pick pretty much any kind of airplane to fly in your flight simulator. And that's true not only for X-Plane, but also for Microsoft Flight Simulator or Prepared. That's really, really fun. You can also fly helicopters, sailplanes, or all kinds of experimental planes. You can even design your own and try to see if it flies. And that's a really thrilling. So we're going to fly with the Skyhawk, a basic, very well-known student airplane. And what's also nice to know is that the entire world is included in flight simming. So it's not a fictitious kind of fantasy world that you're flying over. The actual airports and landscapes and countries are there virtually, which is really, really exciting. You can also change the weather, as you can see. We can add some clouds and change those. What you can also do is to download real world weather conditions. So then your computer is going to search on the internet, look for all the local weather reports and integrate those in flight sim. And you see the real weather like it is right now outside, which is really, really cool. You can also change the time. As you can see, night flying is also very, very challenging. So this is kind of the general setup, and then you can hit start, and there we are, right? So we got some, we've got a Cessna Skyhawk here, and we're on the ramp. This is our nice Cessna Skyhawk, as you can see, on the ramp with some other airplanes. And this is actually an airport that really exists. This is French Valley in California, Southern California, and there we are. Now, what we can do before we start flying is get some additional software installed in our flight sim that makes the sim a little bit more fancy or pretty looking or more realistic. There are all kinds of third-party add-ons that you can buy. Some are free, that are also very highly recommended, but are optional. So you can just start flying with the base, with the default kind of X-Plane in this case, or Microsoft Flight Simulation or Flight Simulator or Prepared. But there are all kinds of possible available add-ons. So one of the add-ons, at least in X-Plane, that I really like. These are also, by the way, these are add-ons specifically for X-Plane. For Prepare, there are many more. So this is X-Plane specific. One of the add-ons that I really like is flying with photorealistic scenery. So let's change that up here. Woof! Now we actually downloaded and transposed satellite imagery onto the scenery in X-Plane. So as you can see now, you see the actual cities, the actual roads, the actual landscapes. It looks so damn pretty, but it is not only a pretty thing. Now as a pilot, especially for me as a serious student pilot in the flight sim, I can now much more reliably use all kinds of charts, and I can navigate like real pilots because I know where all the landmarks are. So it also provides some educational value. So this is one particular add-on that's optional that I and many other sim pilots really, really like. You can do the same thing with the airports. Airports you can download. People that are designing airports to really mimic what they are in the real world. So that's what we did here as well with French Valley. Now you can see we got satellite imagery. We got a realistic looking airport. It looks much more pretty. So now if you're going to make a flight, you will be, I guess, a little bit more entertained than with the default scenery, which is good as well. But these are just add-ons that can add to your, again, satisfaction, I guess, when you're flying. The same thing is true again, as I mentioned before. Flight simulation is not just about being a pilot. There are also people who love to design these airports. There's software that you can use as well as a layman that might interest you. You can design airports. You can design your own fictitious airports and learn what it is to create a proper, efficient airport. And that's also really, really fun. There are a lot of people in the community who are doing this and also providing a lot of software that we as pilots then can use and install in our flight sim. So the community is bigger than just flight simming pilots. There are also airport designers. There are also airplane designers that we're going to talk about in a few slides as well. Just again to broaden that idea, that perception that flight simulation is only about being a pilot. Same thing we can do with the airplane. We can also add some software to that on that side. Well, first off, we're now flying in a Cessna Skyhawk. This is the default livery, the default painting, a white Skyhawk, as you can see. I like to fly with my own colored Skyhawk and also with my own registration number. So you can do that in Photoshop. There are also painters, airplane painters out there. So here we are. This is my Cessna Skyhawk livery. And we're also going to add a package by simcoders. It's called the Reality Extension Pack that adds a lot more interaction points in the airplane and makes the flight model a lot more realistic than the basic default airplane. And again, this is optional, but I like to fly with a lot of realism. You can see it also looks a little bit more fancy. So that's a package that I bought and installed in my current flight sim. Right? So in this way, you can stagger or add all kinds of, well, specialized software to your flight simming to gain in realism, flight realism, or to gain in how pretty, just eye candy, how pretty the flight sim looks. And this is up to you. So what we did now, just before we even went flying, we upgraded our airport, we upgraded our scenery, photo real satellite imagery, we upgraded the realism of our airplane, we painted our airplane. So let's just get started, right, with our flight. So this is the map in X-Plane that shows us where we are. This is Southern California, and if we go down, you might see that yellow airplane there to the left. That's where we are currently at French Valley, an untowered airport. And you can see, well, lakes, you can see mountaintops there. It's just like a map. And again, this is a map that represents where the actual airports are and the actual mountains are. This is not a fictitious kind of scenery. This is actually what the landscape looks like. What we can do in this case is fly from our nice little pretty untowered airport, French Valley, where we are currently parked, and fly to Palm Springs. It's a bigger towered airport, a few miles to the east, and make that trip, right? Might be fun. Let's do that for this as part of this presentation. Now, what's interesting, again, another kind of, well, not really an add-on, but just to show you how realistic flight simming is. And again, this also applies to Flight Simulator X or Prepared. Since this is real, at least the location of the airports and the scenery is all real, we can also now use, if we like, real-world aviation charts. Now, at skyvector.com, you can have free access to all aviation charts that pilots also use for their flights. And you can overlay that, in this case, just as part of this presentation, overlay that on top of X-Plane, and it just works. It's the exact same thing. So this is the same flight, but now we're using real-world aviation charts, which looks so pretty. I'm a really chart lover, and there are many other different charts here, and this is just one particular, a sectional VFR sectional chart, and you can see a lot of information there. What you can study, how to read those charts, because it also applies to flight simming. You don't have to, but it's really, really fun. And again, think about children who you, as a parent, how you can engage in flight simming, how you can teach them how to read charts, to calculate distances and stuff. Already running ahead here on my presentation, and we're going to talk about in a few slides. But I think this is so cool. So we got this particular straight leg right towards Palm Springs. Now, and as a pilot, again, you can, if you're not into this, you can just start up your airplane and just fly straight ahead to that Palm Springs airport. Right? It's just no harm can overcome you because it's only virtual, right? But you can also challenge yourself a bit and think, okay, is this actually the safest route to follow to get to Palm Springs? Or if this was a real-world flight, would pilots actually fly in a straight line towards their destination airport in this particular case? Well, we can simulate that, at least here as part of the presentation. So just behind me, our Skyhawk just takes off just in a straight line. We head over to Palm Springs. Well, you might see that might pose a problem. Most definitely, actually, terrain. Mountains are in between our local airport, where we start, our departure airport, and our destination. So this is actually not a really safe and efficient, well, perhaps it's efficient, not if we crash, but this is not really a safe route to go by to get to our destination airport. So how do we fly actually in a safe manner to our destination airport like real-world pilots do? Which is really, really interesting. Well, a great route to go is actually to go up north. Why? Well, also in flight sim, we might have engine trouble, and we need another alternate airport to divert to in case we have an engine out, so we can safely land. Also, you like to have some navigation points, some landmarks that you can follow that are quite clear. You can see some lakes and some airports there that we can follow, which is a little bit more distinct than just flying over that desertary land straight to Palm Springs from French Valley. So there are lots of other things that you can consider here. The weather, how hard we're going to fly, how much fuel we need to bring with us to make the trip, but just to spark that interest of how you can already, we're not even flying and we can already have so much fun trying to interpret these charts and make a nice flight. To design a safe and efficient flight to our destination airport. So, we've got our flight, we've got our general flight path in mind. So let's get started. What we can first do is, just because it's nice, add some clouds, some nice puffy clouds into our flight sim, because hey, we are the architects of our own virtual flight simulation world. So there we are, some clouds. And what we can do is, and this is again provided by that realistic add-on that, or that add-on that provides a lot more flight realism to my airplane. It's called the Reality Extension pack by simcoders. We can actually do a walk around and do checks in our airplane like real pilots do for this airplane. Which is really, really cool. So now we're walking through all the different components of the cockpit to make sure that our airplane is actually safe to fly, which is really important. And again, that also shows you that, also an X-plane, but it also counts for all the other flight simulation platforms out there, that you can set failures, also random failures, and you can practice to deal with those emergencies while you're flying. And again, that's also why imagine that it's not only people who are unfamiliar with aviation or unfamiliar with flight simming that like these add-ons that provide this realism, but it's also that real-world pilots are very, very, very interested in these add-ons, because then at home they can practice with these checks and with these realistic flights and stay current and skilled at home in preparation of their next actual real-world flight. So that's really, really fun. I really love this add-on. I'm also partnered with simcoders. I love the stuff that they develop. For each flight that I make, I'm flying with that add-on package. So when I'm checking or walk around the airplane to make sure that all the components are properly working, like real-world pilots would do. So there we are. Close the door. I'm shortcutting through all kinds of checklists here. We should do a lot more checks in the real world, but just for time's sakes here for this presentation, I'm going to go directly to the startup of the engine. So what we're going to do is prime the engine here. So we pump a little bit of fuel into the cylinders or in the engine pipelines. Make sure no one is walking around. And we start up our engine. And there we are. And again, in this case with an add-on, the engine behaves just like it should or would in the real world. So the exact same checklist and things apply, which is really, really fun. But if you feel intimidated by this, you don't need to install that add-on, and you can just start flying, even already start mid-air and do whatever you like to do in the flight sim. But if you're into studying these flight skills and flight procedures, well, you can. This is also a very nice add-on by Flight 1. Reality XP, the real GPS features. So many airplanes are equipped with GPSs, and this is one. And you can install an add-on that provides full functionality, and that's what I really like as well. So here you can see an actual GPS that real pilots work with as well, that I can now use in the Flight Sim 2. And again, real-world pilots can benefit from the flight sim as well by learning how to use a GPS, but also in flight, in a flight sim, in preparation of their flights. So we release the parking brakes here, and we get going finally. And again, you notice as part of this talk, that I did yesterday, is not mainly just showing people what it's like to fly in a flight sim, but I actually spend a lot of time in making explicit that how important it is to broaden that perception of what it means to, well, also be a pilot, but also to be a sim pilot, and what it is like to practice flight simulation. So that's why I spend that much time in introducing all of this stuff. But hey, so we're taxiing here, and again, this airport is pretty much exactly the same, pretty much the same as the real airport in the real world. Which is really, really fun. So you would see the same kind of landscape, same kind of hills in the distance. So we just fast forward here to the threshold before the runway. We're ready to take off, so we make sure that no one is around. Give a little bit more power here and drive up to the beginning of the runway. Now, as you can see, again, for those who are unfamiliar with flying, you can see two numbers here. or 118 you can see here depicted on at the beginning of the runway. Well, what does that stand for, 18? Well, it's actually the direction, the heading that we are pointed towards right now when we're on the runway. And you should actually add a 0 to that number, and you get 180. So that's the heading that we are pointed to, and that resembles that we are pointing towards the south. Now, remember, our flight path, we need to go to the north, right? Northeast. So we are about to take off. What turn do we need to make to get going, right? So we can grab back to our nice aviation chart. And you see we're pointed down. And what we need to do is actually go all the way up. So in that case, we need to make a left turn and make sure that we spot that first navigation point that we picked to get to our destination airport. And that might be that first lake that you see there circled, and you can see all kinds of other marks that we might spot while we are flying to get all the way up to our Palm Springs airport. And that's really, really fun. So you're flying with an actual aviation chart next to you in the flight sim, and you're practicing the same kind of mental skills that pilots use every day to get around, which is really, really fun. So here we are back in the cockpit. We need to make a left turn, and we're going to look for that lake. That's our first reference point, our first navigation point. So let's see if we can spot it. So we extended our flaps just a while ago. We extended our wings a bit so we can get a little bit more easy up into the air. We can take off a little bit more easy. So there we go. Airspeed is increasing. And around 60 knots, we can lift up the nose, and there we go. And man, guys, I tried VR at the Flight Sim weekend, and I did my takeoff and my circuits with Philip by the X-Plane developer team. It was just so thrilling. I teared up of excitement. It was absolutely amazing. And one thing though that wasn't really that good yet, and it had to do with the Oculus, is that the resolution is too poor to read the radios. So especially when you're flying with the radios, you cannot read those because the resolution is too poor, it's too bad. So we need better, a 4K, 8K kind of VR goggle to make that happen. So I think I will not get the VR goggles just yet. Anyways, we're taking off. We're climbing to get some space here. So we're free of obstacles, and we're going to make that left turn here right now towards that first reference point, that lake. Now let's see if we can spot it already. Look over the cowling here, look over the dashboard. Let's see if we can find it. So look at our instruments here that we're really climbing nice, not too steep of a turn. Also a lot of fun to practice with that in the flight sim. And that also transfers to the real world, which is really, really cool. You can see the lake, get our map, and you can see we are on the right track. We found our first navigation point, so here we go. Climbing up, keep our speed at around 80 knots, that's usual. And climbing all the way up, we turn off our landing lights. You put on very bright lights when you take off or land, so you're visible to everyone in the airspace. Which is, I guess, seems a little bit contradictory to turn on your landing lights when you're taking off, but these are just bright lights, so that's why. Okay, so that's our takeoff. Now let's also talk about planes, because you can actually design your own airplanes, at least also in X-Plane, which is really, really fun. A lot of people do this quite extensively, actually. It's also another branch of flight simulation practice. It's not just about learning how to fly an airplane. You could, but you can also design airplanes, even sell them to other flight sim pilots, which is really, really fun. And just to show you how sophisticated at least X-Plane is in generating the right physics, the physical laws in the virtual flight simulating world to create that flight realism, we can visualize the vectors, all the calculations that are going on while we are flying real time. As you can see here, if you look very, very closely, it's hard to see. You can see where the wing generates lift. You can see how the propeller interacts with the airframe. And this is all happening real time. So this is not just some fictitious model, a very simple PlayStation, Xbox flight model. No, this is actually why you need a gaming computer, because it takes a lot of calculation power to make possible that realistic flight performance. But that's also part of flight simulation. Well, not really practice, but part of the world of flight simulation that you can also design and paint your own aircraft, which is really, really cool. Next add-on. Well, we're now flying on our own, right? Let's fly online. Well, why? Well, we can fly multiplayer, we can fly with our buddies, but also, and that's something that I really, really like, we can actually fly under the guidance of actual air traffic controllers in flightsim. And do all the ATC stuff and learn how to speak like a pilot while you're sitting at home with your cup of coffee behind your computer. And that's really, really cool. So what we're going to do is connect our computer to the internet and hop on either one of these three multiplayer networks. On top you can see those. xenviro and flightsim are very popular online multiplayer networks where you can fly with others online in that same flight sim. So you can spot others in the flight sim flying, but you can also be governed by air traffic controllers, mostly amateur air traffic controllers. And well, Project Fly here is a website that really provides a very nice and neat, tidy overview of where people are flying in the virtual world. It's actually the real world. It's the same kind of global kind of map as you can see, but virtually in Flight Sim. And independent of whether you're flying on X-Plane or in Microsoft Flight Simulator or in Prepared, it all gets combined, which is really, really cool. Also gives a sense of community. This is really I think one of the latest developments in the flight simulator world or flight simulator community. We're now increasingly flying online. I cannot even think about going back and fly offline again. It's so much more thrilling and engaging, and also much more realistic to fly online with others and air traffic controllers. Now, one thing that I really like to fly with in this case is flying with pilotedge. Well, why? Because these are air traffic controllers that are governing specifically the southern region of California, and actually it's been expanding. That's not actually true. They're expanding through the states, opening up all kinds of airports with really proper air traffic control protocol. And I really love to fly on pilotedge in that way. You can see a lot of other airplanes are also generated in that area, some of which are AI traffic, which are just generated, but flying real world flights. And some of those airplanes that you see are actual human players that are flying there. And it's so much fun to fly in a crowded airspace, and also to learn how to speak like a pilot in this sense. A pilot is a subscription, though. You need to pay for that, about $20 per month, depending on what kind of subscription you like. If you just like to fly in the local area here in Southern California, which is actually, as a small GA pilot, is huge. But if you're flying in that region, it's going to cost you $20. xenviro and flightsim are free. But the disadvantage there is that sometimes there are no controllers governing a particular airport, because these are just mostly amateurs. They need to go to work, or right. So the coverage is much less, and also the quality, I think, is also a bit less. So that's why I chose to fly on pilotedge. Again, this is just a personal opinion, personal preference. Check those guys out if you are considering to fly online as well. Pilotedge. That means now that if we connect our flight sim to the internet and we're gonna get going with that subscription, in this case pilotedge, and we have actual airspaces and other airplanes flying, like would be the case in the real world, we can now also make use of actual flight sim tools, or not really flight sim tools, but aviation pilot tools. For example, the iPad. In many aircraft, or many pilots are bringing their iPads along in their cockpit, as you can see. And one app that is really popular is ForeFlight. It's a app that provides flight planning assistance and support. All maps are there, scratch pads. It's a really nice app. But now, because we're adding all of these packages to our flight sim, and it gets more realistic with each add-on, we can now also bring our own iPad into our virtual cockpit here, and we can make use of the same charts and the same frequencies and the same stuff, because it now also applies to our flight sim. So let's do that. So here we're flying. Some sunset settings here, which is really pretty in X-Plane. and I connected my ForeFlight here. As you can see, this is a map in ForeFlight. This is my iPad display projected here in the presentation, and we can look up a map that actual pilots use as well, and all the frequencies now, all the frequencies that you see in all of those maps are now also applicable, usable, readily available in the flight sim. There's actually someone sitting behind that radio frequency that we can talk to, and we should talk to like a real pilot. So that's what we're going to do right now. So we set our frequencies here. We're nearing Palm Springs, our destination airport.
Tower, Sky Papa Hotel Tango, and Mike is 10 miles west of the airport, currently at 6,500 with go inbound for a full stop.
So here I announce my position like a real pilot would. This follows the same kind of protocol. And this is so cool, guys. Also quite challenging to learn. So I'm now waiting for a reply by the air traffic controller.
I am Twin Tower. Stay again for position.
Hotel Tango Mike is 10 miles west, 6,200 inbound full stop.
DHTM 3360 IDEN.
3360 and identing Papa Hotel Tango.
So we receive a squawk code as in the real world. It's kind of like a code that we can put into our cockpit, and then the air traffic controller on his radar screen will see that code near the blip that he thinks is us on his radar, and so he can identify that he's actually seeing us on the radar.
Palm Springs Delta 3016, inbound land.
3016, and that's affirmative, Papa Delta.
Sam, Roger. Tur runway 31 right, and report midfield.
31 right, and we will report midfield. Papa Hotel Tango 80 Mike.
Alrighty, so what we receive now is a landing instruction like it would in the real world. And again, guys, imagine also for real world pilots how flying on pilotedge, flying online can be so valuable, educationally valuable, let alone that it's fun for us as sim pilots to get so much more closer to what it feels like, what it is to be a pilot, because now you need to incorporate all of that chat, all of that talk with ADC as well, which is really, really cool. But again, it's optional. It's an add-on that you can install if you like to. And well, if you're looking for any ATC kind of service, really check out pilotedge. Really love those guys, great support, and really great product quality. Again, personal opinion, but yeah, I really feel strongly about that. Okay, there's another add-on that we can add. Again, optional. Wouldn't it be cool if we could add passengers to our airplane? And I don't mean virtual passengers, I mean real passengers. Well, in a way, we can. As you probably already know, YouTube is filled with flight simulation videos, and many people show their flight simulator flights, like I do as well, and people can comment afterwards on those archived videos saying, oh, that was a nice flight, and it's kind of like that they are flying as passengers with you. But there's a new development going on, and I think many sim pilots are not that aware of that platform yet. Forget about YouTube, head over to Twitch. Twitch is about live videos. So it's not that you're looking at an archive video, but you actually see sim pilots like me video streaming their flights live to Twitch, and you can jump aboard, look at that video, and chat with me while I'm flying. But you can also not only chat with me, but also with anyone else who has jumped aboard and is watching the stream. And we can all chat and fly, we can interact. And that's such a wonderful new experience also for me as a sim pilot, but also for many of you who are following me to get closer or get more familiar or get to know your favorite sim pilots in a such more intimate kind of way. It's really wonderful. So what I do is, as I already mentioned, is I stream my flights, my own flight simulator flights here from my computer online to Twitch. And everyone who is following me on Twitch and also on Twitter will get a notification like saying, hey, Tim is now flying. He just went live. It's kind of like live television. And you can hop over to Twitch, hop into the chat box, and you see my feed here like you see here, and you can chat with me. I sometimes ask questions to my viewers, or viewers ask questions to me about flight simming or about flight procedures. Sometimes real-world pilots come along and give tips, and so it's such a wonderful new way, an addition to flight simulation practice. Also for me as a sim pilot, but also for many flight simulation enthusiasts. And that's Twitch. As you can see, it's kind of like, it works kind of like YouTube. It's just the same. It's just a website, and you can create an account. But in Twitch's case, it's not mostly archived videos. There are some archived videos there, but it primarily features live video. And you can just hop on and also meet many other people there who come on the channel and watch the stream with you, which is really, really exciting. So let's enable that feature as well. Let's go online and stream our video to Twitch. So here we are. Let's enable the overlay. Sitting just in front of myself, but I'm actually behind. This is what my overlay looks like, and you can see, which is really exciting. People can follow channels, people, sim pilots who are streaming their flights, but they can also donate and subscribe. So I have set this particular donation goal at the moment to save up money to do one time a real-world IFR flight lesson in the real world, and video record that and then share that with all my viewers. And some viewers donate $2, $3, $10, and over time I eventually hopefully reach my donation goal, and that's in that way I can return some additional cool content, which is really, really cool. So Twitch is really the next new thing, and adds kind of like passengers to your own airplane. And anyone can stream in that sense. You only need a computer, a good gaming computer, and you need a good internet connection and a Twitch account, and there you go. Yeah, it's a little bit weird that I'm sitting just behind myself here, but well, have a look at my YouTube channel and my Twitch channel. You will see what my streams look like. So here we come into Palm Springs at sunset. It's gorgeous in X-plane. Also much more challenging to fly, actually. So here we go. Before touchdown. And there we are. And again, this airport, Palm Springs, also exists in the real world. And also I downloaded a particular add-on software that makes this airport look more pretty and more realistic. So, and now we are taxiing back. So, guys, this is one particular flight from one airport to the next, and I staggered all of those possible add-ons. There are many more add-ons that you can add to your flight simulation experiences. Also ones that I didn't cover here that are active right now in the flight sim. Have a look around at YouTube, but also come over to Twitch. Come over to Twitch and chat with sim pilots and ask them what kind of add-ons they are using. Ask others who are watching those streams what add-ons they are using. That's really the place to be. It's live video is such a thrill in comparison to, oh, there goes my streaming screen again. In contrast to YouTube. So yeah, here we are parked at the ramp here at Palm Springs, and that completes our flight. Now, just to make sure, I also started from scratch with my flight simulation practice. This is the UncertifiedPilot.com website, my own project website. That's where I feature all of my videos and all of the stuff that I've also been talking about right now. And what I did was I started live streaming my very first flight when I was a noob with flight simming. So I'm currently at my, well, 200th episode or something like that, and I stream each and every flight that I make in flight sim, hoping to get all the way to a instrument rating in flight sim as closely as I can. But just to show you that also I started as a layman and started and just with practice and just also enjoying the fact that you are learning how to fly, to challenging yourself, to study new things. That's really where the thrill is, at least in my case, where the thrill of flight simulation really gets quite clear. So UncertifiedPilot.com. My next step is, my next challenge is to also fly with FS Economy, another add-on, a free add-on, where you can actually apply some kind of economics to your flights, and you actually have virtual money that you can earn or money that you need to spend to repair your airplane or to park your hangar virtually in a hangar, which is really, really fun and teaches you something about, well, the economics of flying an airplane, which is really, really exciting and totally new to me. So I have no idea how this works, but I will very, very soon. Also, another very nice branch of flight simulation is building your own flight simulator. There are a lot of people who are already familiar with IT, who are tinkering with making their own flight simulation. And well, a good flight simulator buddy of mine, Avanek, who joined me with talking about particular parts of this presentation as well at Flight Simulator Weekend, is really into building his own flight simulator as well, or at least get the idea of how it works. And that's also, imagine what kind of skills and things you learn as a student in school to build that, and also learn in the same way, in parallel, learn about how an airplane actually flies, because you need to simulate it, right? So there are so many different areas of, well, not really practice, but things that you can do or that are included in the world of flight simulation that goes beyond just flying an airplane. And I just like to show that as an example. So that concludes step number 2. Well, 3 and 4 are a bit shorter. I realize this is a really long presentation. I'm really taking my time here because I'm just having fun. Anyways, that completes that chunk that flight simulation is not only intended for AV geeks, for aviation geeks, not only for aviation nerds. Also, if you're completely oblivious of how an airplane flies and what a pilot does, flight simulation can be something that interests you as well. That can be a wonderful practice, a wonderful hobby. So feel free to join that flight simulator community. It's not only for nerds. Really important to know. Next up, it's also not only for men. And also in the real world, women are across all the branches in the aviation industry. So don't think that also in the real world, but also for flight simming, that it would only fit men. No, that's not true at all. And I think, and that's also why I think it's so cool, not only fun, but also so important to feature my own girlfriend flying here also on the channel in the flight sim. She actually got interested in flight simming through my enthusiasm, which was actually quite unplanned. And we were just having dinner, and I was already thinking about my next stream, and I thought, well, I need to plan my flight, right? I need to go to a particular destination airport. Lots of airspace is there, and I was flying on pilotedge, so I was rehearsing what I needed to say and stuff. And she was just eating dinner, and she was actually quite curious to know what kind of considerations are necessary for making a safe flight in my case there. And so she took my ForeFlight iPad and had a look at the charts, and she thought, oh, that's interesting. Well, no, these charts look actually quite pretty. How does it work actually to plan a flight? What do we need to do to, well, A, B, and C. And so she very gradually got interested in flying through actually reading charts, and eventually was quite curious to actually give it a try herself. And she stepped here in the cockpit and made her first flight. And I video streamed that as well here at the UncertifiedPilot channel. And eventually she actually soloed here virtually in the Skyhawk. And it was such a thrill, and also a thrill for me to see that she was enjoying flight simulation that much, but also because we live streamed it, we received so many positive responses by so many people, how inspirational it is to also see someone who has no clue about aviation at all to learn that stuff, but also to see women fly airplanes in the flight sim. Flight simming is also so suited for women. So again, if you're a parent, if you got kids, try to tempt them to also consider flight simulation. It's such a thrill. Don't think it's only for boys. Really important. And what's also interesting is that through our season 1 of our series, we actually set up a donation goal to save money for Mrs. Uncertified, my girlfriend, to do her actual real-world first flight lesson. She never sat down in a Skyhawk before, and here she is. She's landing a Skyhawk on her own and on our local airport here, transferring all of that knowledge from the flight sim to the real world. Well, I've never seen her smile that much. It was really exciting, and also for me, my gosh, really, really, really cool. So again, tempting or sparking that to broaden your perception or idea of what it means to be a pilot or to be a sim pilot. Flight simulation is not just about being a chauffeur. Well, last off, and well, I already mentioned that a couple of times. I also think, and if you look at that pioneering kind of concept, how interdisciplinary it is to also be a sim pilot, what kind of skills you need to apply and knowledge you need to have or gain to make a safe and proper flight. It might not be that surprising to see that flight simulation can provide with a very rich, high potential learning environment to engage our students, our children, into pioneering thinking, be a creative problem solver, be curious, a critical thinker. And that's something that really, really closely resembles or connects to a lot of policies, education policies, not only in the Netherlands, but also internationally. In my talk here at Flight Simulator Weekend, I connected it specifically to Dutch education policy, but this is happening globally, where education policy makers and teachers and also researchers are waking up to the fact that we do not need children who only know a lot of stuff, but we also need children who keep learning a lot of stuff, also on their own. They need more advanced skills to keep learning on their own. They need to be curious, and all kinds of other skills, which is commonly referred to as 21st century skills, which is actually a term that I'm not really that happy with, because these kinds of skills are not really that applicable specifically to the 21st century. These are future-wise skills. These are timeless skills. Being a good learner is something that is not only applicable for the 21st century, I'm sure. Anyways, this is a really hot topic currently in the world of education. Also, that what my research project is all about as a PhD student. I try to help primary school teachers to stimulate children's creative problem solving and curious thinking and all of that stuff as part of their everyday lesson practice, because it's so important, but also because children much more like that kind of education than just opening up a book and just drill and practice stuff that they might use once in their lives. Not to say that math and reading and all of that stuff is not important, but it's just one part of a much bigger skill set that is actually much more predictive of how they will develop their talents and make a difference in the world. So, given those education policies, I think that things like qualities like being a visionary, engaging children and thinking about the future, thinking about how aviation is developing and how they can perceive or foresee a role for themselves to make a difference, should already happen in primary school. We can already engage children in that kind of thinking, create problem solvers, develop that problem solving kind of thinking as part of their way of dealing with all kinds of societal questions or issues that are related to aviation. These are qualities that we need to nurture in our students, and I think that flight simulating can provide a really rich environment to do that. And not only just to spark their interest in becoming a pilot, but to become also an aviation engineer or all kinds of other branches in the aviation industry where we need talented new young people. It connects to so many other subjects in school as well. It's almost a thematic kind of learning, where you can integrate a lot of isolated subjects, school subjects, and integrate them in a much more meaningful thematic kind of way. So that's the main message, actually. Also, the true spirit of the Uncertified Pilot. It also connects my work, obviously, as an educational designer and researcher. I really feel passionate about this topic. to inspire our next generation of young talented people to make a difference in the world, but also specifically related to flight simming. I think that flight simulation is more than a game, and this is the reason why. It's not just a game, it's a learning environment. And I think the difference is not a given. It's not that if you just put your son or daughter behind a flight simulator, magic happens and they suddenly become pioneers and interested in the industry of aviation. No, as parents, but also as teachers, we should help and guide our children or our students with learning about aviation. Also through that process, learn about themselves, about their own talents and interests, and perhaps see that the aviation industry provides a lot of opportunity for them to make a difference and get to work. So I think that's a really important message here. And I think also, and now I turn back to flight sim, that is something that Flight SimCon, but also Flight Simulator Weekend or any flight simulation convention should focus on, to bring in newcomers. Where are the teachers? Where are the students? I think we should open up flight simulator conventions so much more and invite not only elderly men and nerds into those flight conventions, but also really stimulate newcomers to come in, and also provide exhibitions and workshops and all kinds of interactive sessions for them to get to know flight simming, to expand their ideas of what it means to be a pilot or a sim pilot. Well, the stuff that I've been talking about in this sense. And that's something that I think is really, really important. And as parents, but also I think as simmers, flight simmers, perhaps you're a Twitch streamer as well, or a YouTuber, I think this is really important to include in your streams as well, to let people know that if they are completely unaware of aviation or have no idea of what it means to be a pilot or to fly an airplane, that they can learn that, and that it's thrilling to learn about aviation, well, also important, I think, in many aspects. Well, and that's really Uncertified Pilot. That's what the Uncertified Pilot is all about. At least that's my aspiration, to make a difference on that front, and to really demonstrate the thrill, but also the educational value of flight simulation that goes beyond just being a pilot. It's instigating, it's inspiring new pioneers through flight simming. And well, that's my belief and that's my aim, and that's why I did this particular talk at Flight Simulator Weekend. And that completes all of the misconceptions that I really felt strongly about to tackle in that talk. And it all comes back to the fact that I believe that in every one of us there is a student pilot. We all have an affinity somewhere with flying, with learning how to fly, and also with flight simulation. And that's why I think that we should really make transparent how rich, diverse flight simulation practice can be. It's not only about flying, but you can design airplanes, test airplanes. You can become an air traffic controller, and in that process learn so much about real, actual societal issues that are currently going on in the industry of aviation. I think that's a really wonderful characteristic, I think, of our hobby. And that to me that really makes flight simming not a game, but a learning environment, or whatever you like to call it. It's not just a simple game, but it can provide you with so much engagement and so much value. So I ended my talk there at Flight Simulator Weekend saying, okay guys, we know our Dutch aviation heroes. We all got that aviation or pioneering spirit running through our veins, and this also applies to anyone on the world. I think it's a human characteristic that we like to pioneer. In every one of us there's a pioneer, you could say. And perhaps with our next flight simulation conventions, including Flight SimCon, we can ignite that pioneering attitude or mindset through the use of flight simulation. I think that would be a great added value, other than just showing fancy cockpits and creating some kind of a LAN party and just demonstrating flight sim. It's also teaching about flight sim. And that's why I think that flight simulation should be taught in school. in I don't know how much time it actually took to do this presentation, so much longer than I initially thought. Anyways, that concludes my talk. Again, guys, if you're interested in this topic and like to learn more, or when I was unclear during particular parts, let me know. Drop your comments below. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave your comments. I watch and read all of them. Really looking forward to your responses. Or email me at tim@uncertifiedpilot.com. Also my website, uncertifiedpilot.com, where you can find a lot about the background of me, but also about my project. Also my YouTube channel that you perhaps already know, and my Twitch channel. If you are interested in joining one of my live streams, well, go ahead. You're really, really welcome to jump aboard, not only to listen to me saying all kinds of rubbish about what I think should be the spirit also of FlightSimCon and FlightSim Weekend and Flight Simulator in general, but also perhaps you can teach me something about how I can improve as a flight simulator pilot, or show me examples of how you as a parent or as a teacher are already using flight simming or aviation to inspire your son or daughter or your students. Really, really love to learn a little bit more about what you're up to in context of this main message of this presentation. All right, guys. Yeah, I really feel eager to fly, actually, to stream in just a moment. I have to see if I've got some time for that. Anyways, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for your time. Again, this is what the Uncertified Pilot is all about. Just my personal experience, my personal opinion about what I think really drives me as a flight simmer to practice flight simulation. I hope you enjoyed, and let me know what you think. And as always, happy flights and blue skies. Bye.